Alec, it is great to talk to you. I wonder, what has the last month been like in your life?
The last month has been a lot of press screenings, premieres, interviews. I'm like an introverted writer at heart, so this has been like you have to come out of your shell a little bit and have a bunch of small talk and answer a bunch of questions, which has been good. It's a good exercise, but we're winding down a bit, so I'm excited to just be back at my desk writing.
I find that I kind of identify with you in that way. Like outside of this, I'm a pretty quiet and reserved person. For my main job, I am a writer, but I have such a
Yep.
passion for movies and talking about movies. This is kind of how I've had to get out of my shell, being more extroverted.
Yep.
For you, your entire life, you've just been writing things, and now
Yeah.
everybody wants to talk to you. They're all inspired by your story. So, what was that like initially of like, oh man, now I got to speak to people. People want to know my story. Like, did you form like a go-to response to certain things?
I try not to, but like you do enough of these interviews, it feels like you're giving like the same answers every single time. Like you can only answer the questions you're asked, But no, it's interesting. Like the life of a working screenwriter, like a lot of the time is spent not writing. You do meetings, right? Obviously, but you also are putting together pitches, and whether it's you're pitching an original project or you're pitching on like a studio's IP, there is an element of it where there's a bit of performance, which is really kind of antithetical to what a screenwriter should be, like it's what you're saying. We're like the nerds who like being alone with just with final drafts. So it's interesting, man. I don't know. There's a lot to the job more than just writing, interior, Nike 1984, it's like there's all this other stuff that comes with it.
When it comes to your creative process, and we were just talking about how much of your creativity is sparked by just being bored. Because I find that sometimes when I'm so busy doing so many things, it's hard for me to sit down, like, all right, now's your time to be creative.
Yeah.
Where does that come from when you're like, okay, I really don't have anything to do? This is
Yeah.
where my creativity comes from now?
Well, I look for characters first and foremost, characters that are interesting, that have like a clear journey to go on, that I think would be fun to write, that I'm excited to write. It's so hard to write, truly. Like the easiest thing in the world is just not to write. There's so many other things you could be doing and things that can occupy your time. Like you really have to, at least for me, feel passionate about something to like actually get in final draft and get going on it. So I look for characters that spark, and for Air, it was Sunny, like it wasn't even so much the shoe or the world. It was just Sunny was such a fascinating character, and to me, this is such an interesting way into his story, and he was such a fun character to write, because of who he is in real life and the life he's lived and the places he's been. So I chase characters, and I try to find stuff that I'm excited to write about, which sounds like obvious, right? Well, obviously you want to
Yeah.
write about something you're excited about, but like it's easy to lose that passion very quickly, right? You have to do rewrites a million times, or it especially where I was as like an unproduced screenwriter, you're chasing jobs, so it's like sometimes you can talk yourself into being passionate about it, but like really deep down, it's like
Yeah.
it wasn't there. And the script and the movie really has been a lesson for me in chasing those projects that like deep in your core are exciting, and like you want to be at the desk working, because usually it's the exact opposite feeling. It's like, oh gosh, I guess I have to do some pages today, right? But when you can find something that's like, man, I can't wait to get back into the script and get back to working, like that for me is can be a rare feeling. So it was this one was a lesson in like chase that, because this was a script that, especially written on spec, they would tell you not to do, right? I mean, it's about real people, and
Mhm.
there are rights issues and all of that, and like the odds of it getting made are just so low. But for me, it was the passion that really kept me going, because it was like, man, I love these characters, I love writing in this world, and it was a real lesson, like going forward, that's really the type that, like, that's really the only type of stuff I want to be working on, right? And that's easier said than done, but um it was kind of chasing that gut feeling that got the movie to where it is now.
I love hearing you talk about your passion because when I watch Air, a lot of what drove me to the story of Sonny is how passionate he was about basketball, how passionate he
Yeah.
was about pursuing Michael Jordan, how he just felt it in his soul. Like, I know this guy is going to be the guy. So, what
Yeah.
else are you just that passionate about, like Sonny?
Well, you just look back to my past scripts and it's like, you don't have to like the line isn't too far from like stuff I love to what I write about. The script I wrote before Air was called Excelsior, and it was a biopic about, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and kind of those early origins of Marvel Comics. And that was because I grew up as a huge comic book kid. Um, but I love the people behind the thing, and like finding those type of stories. And obviously, we don't have to go into the whole history of Marvel, but it was a very unlikely story to get from, two guys working in a janitor closet at a magazine company in 1962 to, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 coming out in a couple of weeks, and that's just like what an incredible journey that Marvel has gone on. I just thought, gosh, it would be cool to tell kind of the beginning of that. Before that, it was a script about college football, right? And kind of like the underbelly of college football. And that simply came from me being a massive college football fan, right? So it's like you hear a lot in film school. They tell you write what you know, which can be taken very literally, right? You could write a movie about your childhood or growing up. I mean, and there's many examples of that, from Moonlight to Dazed and Confused to Lady Bird. Those are all very personal stories that feel like, they're almost like someone's guts being spilled on the screen, not in a gory way, but in like a passion way. For me, I didn't really have that story, right? I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, basically in a John Hughes movie, right? Which was very nice and pleasant and all of that. But I certainly didn't have some a movie out of it. Maybe one day I'll find that idea, but I didn't have it. So it was like, okay, so when you say write what you know, what do I know? Well, I know about Michael Jordan and the 90s Bulls, right? I know about Marvel Comics and Stan Lee, and I know about college football. So it was like, it was kind of looking at the stuff that left to my own devices, I'm going to geek out over anyway. And it's like, is there a movie in there? Is there a script in there? Is there a character in there that you can kind of latch on to and go from there?
I'm fascinated with the writing process and how this movie started out. You've been talking about, watching The Last Dance. You see that part in the documentary where they briefly mention the Michael Jordan Nike connection.
Yeah.
How do you sit down after you're inspired by that, after you Google it and see that, there hasn't been a movie made about it? How do you sit down and write that script?
Well, you start with fade in on page one. No, I'm kidding. It goes back to what we're talking about, which is finding the character, right? Because this is a movie that obviously you could tell from a lot of different points of view, right? It could be an actual Michael Jordan biopic, right? It could be about Phil Knight. It could be about David Falk, Jordan's agent. It could be about Peter Moore, who actually designed the sneaker, so it becomes a question of, okay, what angle is kind of most interesting and most compelling on this? Now, because I was doing it as a spec script, I knew right away, like, I'm not going to do the Michael Jordan biopic, right? That's just foolish. And this is already unlikely enough to get made, that actually trying to do the Michael Jordan biopic on spec, that's just like, there's no chance. And by the way, Jordan should be the one to tell that story, right? And maybe there will come a time and day when he wants to do that and is prepared to do that. And I think every studio in Hollywood would line up and back up the Brinks truck to do that story. So it's okay, what are the different angles on it? And it gets back to what we're talking about. To me, Sonny, what was most compelling, because, you go through all the research, and at the end of the day, and there's a lot of, varying accounts and people wanting to take credit for different things. But at the end of the day, all the accounts land in the same place, that there was only one guy who said, I have this feeling in my gut that Michael Jordan is the guy we should go all in on. And that's just what an interesting epiphany, like in terms of its ripple on history. I mean, it's hard to fathom, if Sonny had that feeling about any other player in that draft, not to be hyperbolic about it, but the world is different. We
Yeah.
have Air Stockton or Air Bowie instead of Air Jordan. So it was, gosh, what drives someone to have that sort of conviction and determination and feeling? And that's all stuff I just found, universal in a way too, right? In a way that, obviously this is a movie about basketball and Nike and kind of like the nitty gritty of how that process works. But I just figured, man, anyone sitting in that audience has probably been where Sonny was at some point, right? Like employee number 500 at a company where no one's really listening to you, but you have this feeling. And it's like everyone has had a feeling or a dream or a gut instinct at some point in life, and wanted to chase it. So for me, it was like that's a really accessible place to tell the story from. Now, the way to reach a universal feeling like that is through specificity, right? Which is where like the nitty gritty of the draft process comes from. But no, I mean, really, and this was a spec script, right? So it was like I just wrote it all on my own, and I really just wrote it in order. Like this isn't one that I outlined or did a treatment or like got notes on in advance. I just it's a true story, right? So like the outline is kind of already done for you because it's history. So it was kind of a nights and weekends project, right? I had other stuff that was paying me to write at the time, and that's obviously stuff I was focusing on like during the day. But this was like, nights and weekends. I mean, I really wrote most of the script from between the hours of like 10 p.m. and like 2 a.m., like after my wife had gone to bed, it was just me alone and like with my headphones. And I would just go back and like, work on a scene or two. And I really just wrote it in order. And it was an interesting process because most of the time I would just start right at the beginning, and I would read through the script as if I was just like back in my intern days reading some random script by some random guy named Alex Convery. And I would say like, what would I think of this script? Like really trying to remove myself from the process. And I would just keep going until something bumped, and then I would work on that and then keep going. And if something bumped, I would do it again. So it was like, it's a very unique process and not necessarily one I would recommend because it's hard to replicate. This obviously being a true story in a very like short period of time, like kind of gave me the framework was already inherent in the story in a way that isn't there for like most ideas. So I don't know if I could ever replicate this exact process again. Certainly wasn't the fastest process in the world either. I mean, it took me a year to write, which is, a long time for for a first draft of a, 100-page screenplay. But, it's what worked for me on this one.
A lot of this movie, a lot of the conversations take place over the phone. And
Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s, but this movie made me nostalgic for the 80s, just so the fact that I could slam a telephone.
Yeah,
What
for
is
sure.
what has been the most important phone call that you've ever received in your life?
Gosh, in my life, jeez. I mean, something with, something with my family probably, but like professionally, there are a couple, like, I mean, dating all the way back to like getting the first call from, the guys that would end up being my agents saying like, we read your script, Bagman, and are interested in meeting with you for representation. It was like, oh my gosh, that's the call that like, in a lot of ways I've been dreaming of since moving out here for film school. Now, at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I've made it, but it's like, nope, like there's still so much work that has to go into it, Um, obviously getting the call on this one that Ben was interested and I was going to meet with him. That was an important one. I mean, the call after Ben had met with Jordan, basically saying like, Jordan has given his blessing with a few, as long as we can accomplish these notes, and we're good to go. I mean, that was huge. And then, I mean, finally, really the call from the producers saying like, Amazon is going to finance the movie. That's like, again, like in terms of calls you dream of, like that's that's kind of the list on a spec script, like those are all the ones you need to get, and every one of them is very unlikely in its own way. And I had come to learn that over my 13 years living out here, that it's like those are very few and far between. Usually it's getting a phone call saying like, they didn't like the script, up, that actor passed on it, well, time to move on to the next one, this project's dead, like, so it's just like you get used to it, that the good ones definitely stand out.
What was the stress like waiting for the final approval that Michael Jordan has given his blessing on the film?
Like what can you say? I mean, it doesn't get more stressful than that. I mean, it's just like when you lay out what that meeting kind of meant for, again, I was just like, I was an unproduced screenwriter, and like we had everything else ready to go on this one. And it was basically like, if Jordan gives his blessing, then like we're gonna do the movie. And obviously it was Ben and Matt, and she's like, oh my gosh, what a dream scenario on this one. But just as easily, it was like I kind of figured what incentives does Jordan have to do any movie, like he doesn't need to do anything unless he wants to. So look, it's a credit to Ben that Ben was able to like earn his trust and lay out, all of what we were wanting to do with this movie, and have Michael recognize that. That's a very, like, personally, I would have been scared out of my mind sitting there for that meeting, but you know, shocker, Ben knows what he's doing, so it was, yeah, it would be hard. I'd be hard pressed to think of like a more stressful 24 hours than that one, professionally, at least.
So you got to be on set during the filming of this movie, which is pretty unusual for a writer. What was your role
Mhm.
being on set?
Look, mostly I was just there to take it all in. The script was fairly locked by the time we got there. Like Chris Tucker had already done a lot of work on his character Howard, and Ben and Matt had done a pass on the script, and a lot of that was already in place. Now, when we every day when we showed up, there was a little bit of invention here and there, from like, just Bateman, like, really bringing comedy to his scenes, and like that dry sense of humor, that, like, it was in the script a little bit, but like he really embodied it too. Like, look, it's one thing to write the movie, but then you show up on set and it's like, well, the blocking's not quite right, and like maybe we cut this line and move that around, and like that's just the creation that happens on set. It's not like I was sitting there like directing it, or adding a bunch of input. Ben obviously knows what he's doing, but no, I was just there, kind of taking it all in and enjoying it, and helping when it was needed.
I feel like Air is more a comedy than actual comedies. When I went to go see
Yeah.
it in theaters, the entire theater was laughing throughout the entire movie. And you mentioned a little bit of, Jason Bateman adding some comedy to his scenes. Was all that comedy written into the script, or was it just once you had all these characters together, once you see it all unfolding, that it kind of came naturally? It was just a little more just like, oh, this is actually a funny movie.
Yeah, I mean, look, so much of that is in the performance, and all credit to the cast, like a lot of the like dry sense of humor in it. Like, look, you could play that straight, or you could play it humorous, or you could play it somewhere in between, and what I love about the movie is like those are the type of movies I like watching, like, and I'm a big believer in, not putting something in a box, just like, oh, this is a comedy, this is a drama, it's like, to me, the best work, like the best dramas have moments of humor in them, and the best comedy is always rooted in dramatic stakes, so it's like, the type of movies I like exist somewhere in between those two. And I certainly tried to write it that way, but no, without the cast we had, like, there's no chance it would be nearly as funny as the movie is. That's been one of the real joys of getting to watch it in a theater. This was supposed to be a streaming movie, and all credit to Amazon. They really took a chance on it, and said, we're gonna put it out there. And it's just been such a joy to be able to go into a packed theater and sit in the back, and just kind of watch people go on that ride with the movie.
So when the movie comes out and you see that 99% Rotten Tomato score come out, after that, is there any whispers, any text messages or emails going around like, hey, maybe there's a chance for an Oscar here? Does that ever kind of come into existence, or it's just something nobody else like me?
No, no, I mean, gosh, it's just so far out, and like, there's just so many different things that can happen. It's like, look, my job is done, right? It's you write the script, you film the movie, and you put it out in the world, and it's not your place to say how it should be received, and who should receive it, and why, and what you should be awarded for it. Like, that's that's the part of the process I have zero control over. So, what I've learned, over my 13 years out here is like, you can't emotionally invest in the results, right? You have to emotionally invest in the process. So it's like, as long as I am enjoying writing it and believing that the script was, the best I could do at that time, then like, the rest is really up to which way is the wind blowing, right? And it's like, if you can't control that part of it, which I don't, then it's not worth losing sleep over, because life is short, and if you have no control over it, then what's the point of sweating it, right? This is why I always wonder why I'm a sports fan to begin with, because I have no control over how the Bulls are playing or how the Bears are playing, yet I somehow emotionally invest myself in the results of their games. But no, that's about as far as I could go.
So you're about the same age as Ben Affleck and Matt Damon when they wrote Good Will Hunting, and this being your first, credited movie. Do they offer you any kind of advice of where to take your career from here next?
Yeah, I mean, not so, not like directly. I mean, the getting sole credit on the movie and all of that, and having, Ben tell me, personally about that was just a very like surreal to be kind of part of that like lineage. It's still hard to wrap my head around. But no, something Ben has said, which I've really taken to heart, over the last couple of months here is like, he really is a believer in good scripts, and that if it's not there on the page, it's not going to be there on the stage, as they say. He's also talked a lot about, the projects you turn down and say no to are in a way just as important, if not more important than the projects you do decide to take on and say yes to. And goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about like really having to love a project, and really feeling the passion for it. And if it's not there, then, you shouldn't do it. And that's hard when you're young and you've been wanting to,
Yeah.
do all the projects in the world for so long. It's like the gut instinct is to say yes to everything because it's like Hollywood is crazy and you just don't know, how long a moment like this can last. So, take it all while you can get it. And that's kind of the gut instinct. But it's I 100% see where he's coming from, where it's like, like we were talking about, you really got to love something. You really, really have to be married to a project to want to do it and take it on.
I have a few more questions as we wrap up here. Did
Yeah.
you keep anything from the set?
I'm gonna get in trouble, but the cafeteria where they steal the candy from in that scene where Matt and Jason are working late over the weekend. On the last day, I was like, well, it would only be fitting if I also take something from here. So yeah, I have one of those coffee mugs that was sitting on the shelf there. So
And
it's like, it's right. It's what they say. It's not stealing if
yeah, there's no one working the register. You can take it.
that's right. Exactly. So yeah, I have that.
Did you get any free Nike stuff from working on this movie?
Not free, but I was, like when these things happen, there's like you get like a start gift when the movie starts and a wrap gift when the movie ends. So from like, multiple agents and manager, producers and the whole deal. So you can imagine on this film what most of those gifts were
Yeah.
fittingly. But yes, those were they kindly bought those shoes. And yeah, it's been a nice part of it that I've definitely expanded my Jordan collection by a bit.
Do you get a wrap gift from Matt or from Ben?
Well, like the way it works is like the whole production gets it, right? So it's like, you get like a production t-shirt that says casting crew. Like you can find those for almost every movie that that's been made on eBay. Did you see Nope? That
Oh
Scorpion
yeah.
King orange hoodie that he's wearing. That's basically what like a wrap gift is. So I love that part of Nope because it's like it's very kind of inside Hollywood. I when I was in college, I interned on the set of Mad Men, and similar thing. I got like my season 5 t-shirt, and on that one we got some wrap gifts like from the companies that Don Draper was pitching for. So we got like a Samsonite suitcase, like a pair of Ray-Bans, which was funny. And yeah, I think it's a similar thing on this one.
I don't know why, but I find it so refreshing that you're also just so into every new movie. Like as a writer, do you just have to stay up to date on like every movie that comes out because maybe like you want to write something like that or you want to avoid copying another movie?
It's not even that. It's just I love movies. I mean, that's it. Like that's how I grew up. I just going to the movie theater every single Friday and just seeing whatever was out. And I miss those days because it was like going to movies without pretense. Like when you're that young, you don't really have a taste yet. So it was you just take everything in, and that's still the way I am. I mean, I just I'm my friends would tell you I'm much more pretentious now than I was when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. But no, man, there's nowhere else I'd rather be like in the world really than sitting in a dark theater and watching a movie. Like there's just still something about it that is it's my favorite art form, and it's I just love the theater. Sadly, especially out here in LA, like we've lost my favorite ones, like ArcLight Hollywood gone, the Landmark on Pico gone, the Vista in Los Feliz is finally reopening, but it's been very painful losing those theaters, man. I like it feels like a part of me is and like piece of the fabric of the community is gone. So it's been tough, but luckily the new Bev out here is still kicking. That is always one of my favorite spots to go in town. And like, look, hopefully, these theaters we're talking about can find some second life, but it's painful to it's been painful to lose those. I actually went to the last the I don't know if you know LA at all, but the Pico, the landmark on Pico, one of my favorite theaters, especially on the west side, closed down last March. And I went to the last showing ever there just because I was like, it's like that's where I've seen almost more movies than anything. And it was when I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once there. It was very just surreal way to see that movie.
Yeah, I do go to LA a lot for work, and I remember seeing Black Panther at the ArcLight. So whenever that
Yeah.
closed down, that felt like a piece of me went with it too.
No, 100%. I mean, the Cinerama Dome, it's like there's nowhere else like it, man. It just, the great thing about the ArcLight Hollywood was it just felt like a community for film lovers and people working in Hollywood, from below the line to above the line. I mean, you'd see celebrities there, but you'd also just see like other aspiring writers like myself, all kind of together, which like there's something, I'm sappy and a romantic at heart, so like I'm gonna say it that way, but like there was something really special about that place.
And it would feel like an event when you went to a movie there because they would have things out in the
Yes.
lobby, and it just felt like there was
Yes.
an energy to it where sometimes you don't really get that with movies. You just go in, there's an empty, bare
Yeah.
lobby, but there it felt like something.
I know that's one of the painful things now going to, look, I'll go to any movie theater truly, but really being restricted now to kind of these chain theaters that don't have like the love of the form and like the artisan nature to it, like you're talking about. I mean, the lobby of the ArcLight, from costumes from movies to like, I remember seeing the scale model of the Grand Budapest Hotel in there, and it's just like that stuff that doesn't exist in your average chain theaters. And even like the bar, there's just nothing better than going and like having a beer before or after the movie and talking about it. And yeah, that's just something really painful about losing that.
Is there anything you can say about where you're working on now?
Kind of, yeah. I'm working on another script for Skydance and Mandalay, two of the production companies on air. It's another sports movie. So that's really all I can say. It's another true life story with real people. So I just want to respect that. And we're still kind of in the early stages of the process here. But yeah, hopefully that'll be the next one. We'll see. I'm into the script and working on it as we speak.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, man. I'm rooting for you, and I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks, man. This is fun.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.